It's time to take your business to the next level, the boss level. These are the premier business owner strategies and successes being utilized by the industry's top talent today. Rock your business like a boss, a VO boss. Now let's welcome your host, Ann Ganguza.
Hey everyone, welcome to the VO Boss Podcast. I'm your host, Ann Ganguza, and I am with the lovely and talented Erikka J this morning.
Hello.
Hey Erikka.
How are you, Ann?
I'm doing good. How's it going with you?
Going pretty good, man. Hanging out, just another day in voiceover land.
There you go. Another day in voiceover land. And it's so funny because we're so like, oh, yeah, this is our day. This is what we're going to do. We've got our auditions to knock out. We're going to go find some new clients. We're going to be working in the booth. I do have a lot of students that always ask me when they just get involved in the industry, well, first of all, how do I know that I have what it takes? And what genre? What is my niche? Where do I go in this industry? And for me, that's always a wonderful question of self-discovery.
Yeah.
I think there's lots of ways to find your niche in this industry, but I think it would be a good topic to talk about how we found our niches and what our recommendations are for bosses out there that are just getting involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
balancing to let the genre find you.
Yeah. I think that it's kind of like letting your brand find you too. I think they're very similar. They're on parallel paths. Yeah. And I know for me, the genres that I ended up doing, number one, I'm a big believer in following my passion. I've been that way all my life. Now, I don't know if that's just a thing that I just decided to listen to since I was young, but I've always followed things that I've enjoyed doing and found joy in doing. And I followed my passion. When I was young, I played music, I played piano. I had a love affair with horses. I owned a couple of horses, rode horses. As a little girl, I would teach my dolls. All these things that I loved, I did, and I explored. And I have to say that the same is true in my career. As I went to school, what I studied, what I ended up working in the corporate world and in the educational world. And then ultimately, I've found that I've been able to kind of bring it all together in voiceover because, for example, I love to teach. As a little girl, I taught my dolls. I ended up 20 years being an educator in front of the classroom for kids, adults, college kids. And I find that I love e-learning. So the genre is kind of paralleling where my joys were and where my experiences brought me to. So e-learning, I worked in corporate for a short amount of time and then did a lot of corporate consulting. And so I love the corporate read. All of those things have kind of allowed me to do the things that I love to do. And obviously, because I love to teach, I'm a coach as well. And so for my business that is so wonderfully my own, and I feel so lucky and so joyful that I am able to do what I love and be able to support the household and be able to support myself with it. So what are your thoughts, Erikka, on how do you find your genre? How did you find your genre?
Yeah, very similar. Genres. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So for me, I'm always somewhat ADD with my interests. I like that. Ooh, and I like that, and I like that, and I like that. Mm-hmm. So, but sort of my foundation and where I started, I had worked in corporate for quite some time and still do, and primarily in tech sectors. So I absolutely adore tech explainers or products because a big part of what I did as a project manager, sort of understanding the layout and then also breaking down requirements so that when somebody says, I want a widget that does this, having to break it down and be like, okay, so you want this to come out, kind of breaking that down for the user and putting it in layman's terms, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I enjoy doing that sort of breakdown, but maybe in shorter form. So as opposed to where you're talking about how you love e-learning, I'll do some e-learning, but I really love the short form 90-second, let me help you understand this thing and what it does. Mm-hmm. And, taking something complex and making it super simple to understand. I love that stuff. So that's really where I started. Corporate narration, same thing, because of coming from the musical background, which essentially is storytelling in usually 3 to 6 minutes. See, for a really long song is 6 minutes. But that's why I love the commercial work or the short corporate narrations where, I'm really sort of telling a story, sometimes getting more dramatic or using comedy to be able to tell those stories in a short amount of time. It just aligned with where my experience was and what I enjoyed doing. So those were sort of my foundations, along with video games. Love games, played games a lot as a kid, not as much now as I'd like. But I'm surrounded by gamers in my house, so constantly watching that, and I lean towards the dramatic and the dark more than the comedy. So I like using that. But yeah, those are kind of my genres that hit me, and the narration, just loving to tell stories. Those are how I got there.
Yeah, I love that. And I think anybody that's just starting out in this industry, take a look at who you are from young age on up and where you've evolved. And if you've followed those joys or those things that you really enjoy doing, and then try to translate into genres for voiceover, or not even just for voiceover, for your business. The other part is not just the genres, right? But it's also letting the entrepreneurship follow you.
Yeah.
There's the whole period of my life where I like to solve problems. I mean, you and I were both in technology, right? It's always solving problems. And I also have an engineering background. And so because of that, I love the whole entrepreneur owning a business kind of a thing.
Same.
Where I'm excited to build things, to build my business, to see where I can grow, where I can expand, how I can achieve success, how I can continue to reinvest in my business and grow in my business. I think that's the most important thing for me is if I am stagnant, it's like for me, I'm building a character, but I'm really building a business, right?
Yeah.
I keep adding to the story and I have to keep evolving the character. I have to keep evolving the character of my business. And for me, if I become stagnant, then number one, it's boring and I don't do well with boring. But number two, it always allows me to grow. Kind of the whole, think of how do I make money, the whole how do I make money challenge.
Yeah.
I even do like a class on money blocks where some of us have built-in money blocks from long ago where maybe women weren't supposed to be earning as much as men or those types of things. Or the way you were brought up, the male was the breadwinner.
Yeah.
Don't be greedy, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, I consider it part of the entrepreneurial game, right? How to make money with my business.
Amen.
And so it's not that money is like my first love, but I think it's the challenge of the game to be able to invest my money and then make a profit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think what we all want to do with our businesses is to make a profit. And so that also evolves. And that was part of my personality. A big part of my personality is loving to solve challenges and solving problems. Yeah, I took that right into my business.
Yeah, I love that you said self-discovery because that's something that I talk about often too, is that you have to figure out sort of who you are as a person, and that kind of leads you to who you are as an artist. And as that evolves and develops, staying in touch with that is going to tell you when maybe a genre isn't for you or if a genre isn't necessarily your primary. Like, for instance, I love reading. I never get enough time to do it as much as I'd like, but I am not really into doing audiobooks. I know that I like the short form stuff. My attention span gets like, so it's just not for me, even though I love books and I fully appreciate them, but it's not for me to do that as narration. I had to learn that about myself and be okay with it. In coming from a performance background, I discovered live announce was something that I really enjoyed. I'm used to being able to, like on the fly, something live might happen and you've got to be able to react and not be flustered. I did that on stage. So I was like, didn't even know this would really be a thing for me.
That's a special skill.
Right. Yeah. So
the whole live thing.
That self-discovery is really key to letting that genre. And your business, like you said, it's a persona. You're building a brand. Your brand has an identity. It's a story. So you've got to know who you are that's going to align with the brand that you're building.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And interesting that you said being the voice of God. So back in the day, when I used to have to record onto phone systems, you had to do it live. And so you had to be on. If you screwed up the prompt in the middle of it, you had to start all over again. So there's a special skill in being able to be quick on your feet and to execute without mistakes. To me, if I were figuring out my rate sheet for that becomes a factor in the special skills, like for medical narration. I mean, I worked in the orthopedic industry for 6 years, and so I love medical narration, and that kind of found me. I mean, I kind of evolved because I started off in the engineering aspect of things, and then it kind of brought me into a narrower focus with biomechanical engineering at my job at the orthopedic company, which then ultimately translated into medical narration here. And the medical narration has expanded so that I'm not just talking orthopedics. And I'm certainly not a doctor, but the challenge therein lies in learning and discovering new topics in medicine that also I find I love to do, that discovery. And that translates to my voice. So if somebody were to say what genre, I think really it can be any genre that you find that joy of discovery or that joy in. And sometimes you don't know it until you've tried it. Like you said, for the voice of God, you didn't know, right? Until you tried it and then you realized, oh, wow, this is something that my theater training has prepared me for. And so I think every one of us should explore different genres. That's why I think workshops and sessions are a great thing. And one of the reasons why I developed the VO Peeps.
Yeah.
So that I could have special, amazing guest directors come in from all different genres so that my community could have a lot to choose from and a lot to experience, a lot to explore, and a lot to learn. And I think that letting the genre find you, finding what you enjoy doing, I think is probably at the very core of it. And, for me, like you were saying, audiobooks, I did one audiobook and then I said, nope, not for me. I've kind of found the things that I love to do. But again, I don't want to close my mind to trying new things. Yeah. So for right now, I've done a little bit of character work, but I've not really expanded into animation or even into like promo as much. Yeah. But I know that I've got an interest in it, and it's something that I want to look at.
And that's why I think that workshops are such a valuable tool to use in the beginning or as you start to make a foray into different genres, because it's more cost effective, right? Usually they cost less because it's a group as opposed to like one-on-one coaching. You're able to hear what other people are doing and how they're getting directed, seeing all types of different copy, experimenting with different directors, different coaches in these group settings. Mm-hmm. And that way you can kind of see, like, is this really my thing? Like for me, promo, I sort of assume that since I have this lower register voice that, has a lot of power behind it, that it might be something I really want to do. And I always love beating the boys if I can. No offense. But
hey, I hear that.
You know what I mean? And it is still something I want to get into, but I found that it ended up being lower on my priority list because I wasn't getting as much traction as I was in other areas. I was moving faster. So I was like, maybe let me really refine and kind of get to expert level and everything else and consistently book. And then I'll come back around to promo. So it can help you prioritize your genre list as well.
I like that you were talking about kind of letting it find you and you were getting hired in other genres. That's a really good indicator to find out what genre you might pursue in a more targeted, strategic fashion. Is what do you tend to get hired for? Yeah. Do you tend to get hired for explainer videos? Do you tend to get hired for those one-off commercials? Or do you tend to get hired for audiobooks? Whatever that might be the genre that you really flourish in. And again, it doesn't have to be just one genre, but again, it shouldn't be every genre. Right. I really don't know many voiceover artists that do every single genre. I think we all tend to just narrow down the focus a little bit. And it doesn't have to be just two genres, or, it can be like narration. There's a lot of closely related. Corporate explainers are very close to corporate narration. Right. It's very close to corporate training, which is very close to medical narration. It's all part of the corporate world anyway. Yeah. So all of that really kind of works for me. So there's multiple genres there that I can excel and flourish in, and then explore the ones that I haven't really had time to do before because I've been working so much in these other genres, like character or promo or imaging. See, I've always wanted to do radio imaging, but I've never even tried it. Like, never. But I'm always like, I want to sound cool. Yeah. For me, I'd be like, oh, that would be a cool sound. But I've never tried it. I've always been a little shy, actually, about it. But I don't want to not try.
Exactly. And that's the thing is, like, unless you really do it and you're like, this is not my thing, I feel like audiobooks are probably off the table for me, other than I did like a couple kids' books, and I have like a couple like mid-length books that I've entertained, or that I'm like, I might just do this when it's, public domain. I'll do it as a passion project one day just to kind of practice. But if I get one that's expected to be like 12 hours of audio, like I'm not going to do the 48 Laws of Power. I know I'm not going to be able to do something that long. God bless the voice actors that have that type of stamina. I know I don't, and I'm okay with it.
Where I might go, because I love the geeky stuff all the time, right? If there was a book that was completely geeky about, I don't know, a business book, and if it were something that I would discover as I read, I think that could work, but the editing I would have to outsource.
Yeah, I just don't think I could. Maybe that answer will change in a few years for me, even though I love reading it and consuming it or listening to audiobooks.
Sure.
I just want to be in and out. I just want to get it done and be done.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that we don't get complacent.
Yes, agreed.
And for me, that's just always been a thing where I haven't felt comfortable. When I get complacent, I think I get nervous.
Yeah.
Maybe it's more that than bored, or maybe it's a combination of both, right? Yeah. I don't want to get complacent in one job for too long. And to be honest with you, my 20 years in education, I think my job, I had actually, believe it or not, in my job, there were certain levels that I traversed. Right. And I went from getting my hands dirty and learning a bunch of stuff and really challenging challenging, like, oh, why does the network not work here? Oh, let me go and dig the wiring or look at the wiring in the ceiling and see what's going on there. And I love the whole challenge of that, kind of getting my hands dirty. Ultimately, I started year after year, I would advance, then I would go into like the networking, then I would go into the administration. And then ultimately at the last part of my career, I was a project manager. And at that point, I wasn't getting my hands dirty anymore. I was managing people who were getting their hands dirty. And for me, I found out that was not where I flourished. For me, I wanted that challenge of getting my hands dirty, figuring out the solution, not necessarily managing people. And at that point in my career, I had started to become a little bit restless. And that's when I really said to myself, well, I need to do something that's going to allow me to grow. And I think that selecting your genre and balancing your genres or your performance or discovering what that is really comes with a lot of self-reflection in what it is that brings you joy and what it is that you're getting hired, a combination of that, what it is you're getting hired for. And if you're just starting out, try to focus on what are your past experiences. Like for me, I had experience teaching, which led me into e-learning. I had experience working for an orthopedic company, which led me to medical. I installed phone systems as part of my job. That led me to a lot of telephony. So take a look at your experience and see what genre that might lend itself to. Because when you can speak with familiarity and with confidence about something, it's going to be reflected in your voice.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is going to make you good at what you do.
Absolutely. And the other thing is to like not necessarily write off an entire genre, to maybe to explore the subgenres, right? Because like there's animation. And I really kind of thought animation was off the table for me. It's like everybody wants to do that when they come in. Maybe video games, which I do think that that's still more my lane than animation. But what I love doing the villain stuff in animation. So I'm not really necessarily going to too often, I don't really see myself doing like the 14-year-old boy like some women are able to do. But give me a villain role, I'm in. And I'm excited about it.
Now, psychologically, Erikka, why is that? Where is that? Is that release of tension
in real life?
That's right. And then the alter ego kicks
so then
in.
I get to, it's fun.
Yeah. Well, hey, there's a creative challenge.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think that, so bosses, we are all brilliant, right? We are all brilliant people. This is the way I like to think of it, right? We like the creative challenges.
Yes.
And so what is it that challenges you? What is it that you think will give you a challenge that you will enjoy? And so for me, the medical, of course, it's because I feel like I'm helping somebody. I feel like if I do a voiceover for anything medical, right, it's helping somebody. But even more than that, there's like that challenge of, okay, what's the largest word that I can say eloquently,
the verbal
effortlessly
acrobatics of medical.
There you go. That to me is like, ooh, it's such a challenge. And I love it.
Yeah.
Like I dig right in once I get a medical script and there's all these words, I dig in and I create my little phonetic spellings and I practice it so I can say it effortlessly so it sounds like I'm a doctor.
Yep.
But that sort of stuff, I think letting the genre find you and letting your joy find the genre too is something to really think about. And so is there a voice for a genre? I don't think so. I think a lot of people consider like, oh, to do promo, I have to have a low voice. What are your thoughts on that, Erikka?
So not true. And the thing is that the more that you study the genre that you're trying to get into, and I don't just mean workshops and being coached, but I mean actually like watching TV, like going to watch the promos that are on. It's been such a male-dominated genre historically that we just assume you have to come in there and sound like this tonight at 8. And that's just not it, not now.
Right.
So like I've heard women with much lighter voices than me that are super conversational to the point of sounding like a commercial, and they're booking promos. So I think that was a challenge for me and kind of was why I wasn't booking there at first, because I had the idea of what it is supposed to be instead of bringing more of the authenticity to it. The reads are much closer to commercial now for promo, finding my promo voice.
I love the whole authentic thing. And because I think that voiceover artists, like in the beginning, it was always like, for me, when I got behind a mic, I was like, ooh, my voice is amplified.
Oh my goodness.
And then I was like, I like to hear that in my ears. Because it was something like I think sounds good or that somebody would want to hear. And I love the whole, let's get back to being authentic and being ourselves. Yeah. Some of the most beautiful stuff that I've listened to is not a voice that many would consider to be like, oh, a voiceover voice. Yeah. Every time somebody asks me on one of my consult calls, so do you think I have what it takes or do you think I've got the voice? And I'm like, it really honestly And I've said this before, bosses, you guys, if you've listened to the podcast, it's only the first few seconds, maybe 15 to 20 seconds, 30 seconds that people are listening to what your voice actually sounds like. And then all they care about is what you're saying.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And what does it mean? And is it of interest to them? And that connection that your voice has to them and how it can help them, that's really where it all counts. And I think that's why the authentic, the genuine is what sells, in advertising. And it's what connects people together. And I think that's what we all, as humans, we really want. And a lot of this talk about the AI voice, there's going to be a place for that. And I know, Erikka, we could have a whole podcast episode on this. There's definitely a place for that, but only when it's transparent.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm talking to a voice that is not a human voice.
Right.
Like, well, I talk to Alexa all the time. I talk to Siri all the time, and I'm okay with it.
Right.
And Siri helps me. Siri has a job to do, and she helps me.
Yep.
So when I don't necessarily need a human to help me, I am okay with that. But for everything else, right, our human voices need to connect.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most important things. What genre can you divulge your authenticity in and connect with the audience of that genre? Because different genres have different audiences. There's a different audience for corporate training than there is for promo, right?
Yeah.
People listening to promo voices are trying to find out information of what's on television. What's the next exciting thing? Or maybe it's like, oh, what's happening next on HGTV, right? There's your in-show narration. So depending on the genre, there's different audiences. So figure out not only what genre excites you, but know who is listening to the genre and who your audience is. Because that's where that connection is going to happen.
Yeah. And I think it's important to not limit yourself mentally and just say, well, I'm not going to do that. But try it. Like I said, like the audiobooks, I did a couple of kid books. I did a couple of mid-length narrations for like news, and I enjoyed that. But I was like, I couldn't do much more than this. So I know it's not for me. But like, if you don't even give yourself the opportunity to see if you would like it, you might miss out on something that you're really good at. And or like if medical intimidates you, try it anyway, because those skills can translate. So if you're practicing reading multisyllabic words, and you finally get it, imagine how much better you're going to read commercial copy now because you exercised your mouth to be able to get those kind of words out. So now when you get to just sort of regular English, you're going to have that skill that you can translate into another genre. So I think it's good, like you said, to just stay limber, stay flexible, learn how to play, not get stagnant, and play with other genres, but know what your primaries are. And if you do have hard boundaries, to just know, like, that's not for me.
That's not for me. I know a lot of students in the beginning will spend a lot of time like investigating all the genres, and I love that. Yeah. I think there's lots of good things to be said for that, but then there's also students who might spend time in every genre because they're afraid to start.
Yeah.
That might be another podcast, but at least I think exploring the other genres, taking a few classes in the genres. I mean, I took some promo classes with a coach that I loved. I've really explored. I've taken some audiobook classes. I've taken, like I said, the one thing I haven't done is radio imaging, but I know a lot of people that do radio imaging, and I'm still like thinking about, oh, that's kind of like such an older genre. I'm not sure how well it's faring these days. Yeah. Because I do believe I heard you.
I did.
I heard you the other day. Yes, I did. So it's very cool.
But that was fun. Like, it taught me how to play better. Like, and I actually did a little bit of character development, and I've taken that into some commercial copy. So.
Well, that's an excellent point about that, because the crazier and the more dynamic your character is in imaging, it really can help you in other genres. And I think a lot of times people that take my corporate narration, because I'm always teaching how to be the real authentic voice. And that's not what people expect with narration. They expect to have a narrator's voice. And I'm like, no, let's connect to people. And so they can take that technique that they use in narration and apply it to commercial.
Yeah.
Because learning how to be real and authentic with words that aren't yours is something that applies to every genre. So bosses, if you're out there trying to discover that genre, make sure that you're also getting those skills that allow you the acting to be real and authentic in those genres. So take acting classes, get coached on it. That'll do nothing but help you in any genre you decide to pursue.
And corporate narration, I'm finding, is increasingly having more opportunities for us to play. So it's obviously still going to be corporate to an extent, but I've seen some copy where it's like they kind of want you to have the joke, land the joke, be a little funnier, be a little more, laid back. So,
or be dramatic,
or
be passionate.
Dramatic, yes, absolutely.
Yep, that's the corporate gold I'm always talking about. Yep. Yeah, it's good stuff. Yep. So guys, What genre are you?
Yeah. And prioritizing them. Yeah.
Yeah. Look back, look at your passion, what brings you joy. And don't forget that even though you have genres, if you do have genres that you're already pretty well settled into and familiar with, don't forget to always play in other genres because you just never know.
Yes.
You never know. Good stuff. So, question for you bosses. Do you have a local nonprofit that is close to your heart? Because if you do, and if you want to help them, you can join an organization called 100voiceswhocare.org and help them extensively, even if you don't have a lot to contribute. So find out more at 100voiceswhocare.org. And big shout out to IPDTL, our favorite way to connect and network like bosses. Find out more at IPDTL.com. All right, bosses, have an amazing week, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, bosses.
Bye.
Join us next week for another edition of VO Boss with your host, Ann Ganguza. And take your business to the next level. Sign up for our mailing list at voboss.com and receive exclusive content, industry revolutionizing tips and strategies, and new ways to rock your business like a boss. Redistribution with permission, coast-to-coast connectivity via IPDTL.